What's up, guys? John Kelly here. We are back for UFC 273 Underdog Fantasy's MMA pick'em format. Let's hear the picks. Up first, we're going with my guy, Fluffy Hernandez, over half a takedown, so he just needs to land one takedown. He's going up against Josh Fremd, and I expect Fluffy Hernandez to implement the wrestling here. He's a guy who averages just under 4 takedowns per 15 minutes, but it's kind of funny because he's actually only landed one or more takedowns in one of his UFC fights. But part of that was because, stylistically speaking, his last fight where he won by submission against Rodolfo Vieira, he didn't need to offensively grapple there because he knew Vieira was going to initiate the grappling himself. Vieira gassed out on the mat. Fluffy was able to submit him. Jordan Wright knocked him out in 40 seconds. That ended up being overturned on Contender Series, but he didn't need to go to the wrestling. Kevin Holland fight 2 fights ago. Kevin Holland knocked him out inside the first minute. He didn't have time to go to the wrestling. So just because we haven't seen the wrestling in a couple of his fights, I think that's why we're getting such a favorable number here. I expect him to have a clear wrestling and grappling advantage over Josh Fremd, and I think he's going to use that here. I still think the fight ends early, but I think we see at least one takedown before we see Hernandez win by submission. He's a guy who's always looked to wrestle and grapple across all of his regional fights, and just because he hasn't in a couple where he didn't need to in the UFC, I think that's why we're getting such a good line here. So I like Fluffy Hernandez over half a takedown for the first pick of the night. And up next, I like the Olympian Mark Manson over half a takedown versus Vince Pichel. And there's a couple reasons why I like this one. First, Mark Manson, the Olympian level wrestler, he landed 8 takedowns against Austin Hubbard. I think we're getting such a close line, similar to the last one that I talked about, because of his recent fight. Again, he fought Clay Guida in his last fight. He only attempted 1 takedown. He was perfectly fine winning the striking exchanges, almost paid the price because it was a split decision. I think now we see him go back to his roots against a guy like Pichel, who only has a 25% takedown defense. I think we see multiple takedowns here. Vince Pichel, while he can get taken down, I mentioned the 25% takedown defense, he is very good at working back to his feet. So I think we're going to see a guy like Manson, who's not the greatest in terms of controlling people on the mat, versus a guy in Vince Pichel who has a strong get-up game. I think we see 3 or more takedowns out of Mark Manson here. I'm not convinced he wins the fight, but for these purposes, we really don't care. We just want him to land one more takedown than Vince Pichel. I think he does that here. And lastly, we're going with my girl, Kay Hansen, plus half a takedown versus Piera Rodriguez. For starters, Kay Hansen, she shot 11 takedowns in her UFC debut. She's not the greatest wrestler, but we know she's going to be aggressive. She shot 5 in her second fight, and she shot 7 in her last fight against Jasmine Juicy-DeVicious. But especially her last 2 fights, like against Jasmine, who was much bigger than her, good takedown defense. I'm not expecting that takedown defense from Piera Rodriguez here. So in a sense where I think Piera Rodriguez, she landed 3 takedowns in Dana White Contender Series. I don't think that's going to be a game plan here. She should have the striking advantage. I'd expect her to keep it on the feet. A lot of those takedowns that she went for on Contender Series were because of the forward pressure of Valeska Machado, who was just nonstop moving forward against her. That's not going to be what Kay Hansen is doing here. Kay Hansen's the better grappler in this spot. I would think Kay Hansen would be the one trying to get the fight to the ground. So I think that's what's going to happen here. I prefer the Kay Hansen side straight up, and we're getting plus half a takedown. So I like the Kay Hansen side plus half a takedown on the rival side for Underdog this week. As a reminder, for new players who haven't signed up yet on Underdog, use the link in the description below. You'll get $100 free on a $100 deposit. Big UFC 273 card. Good luck this week, guys, and we'll see you next time.